The US has now completely lost the export of soybeans to China.
Whenever you do to plant now, you have to hope Trump doesn't kill the foreign market for that crop before you harvest in a few months.
American corn, a crop that once fed hundreds of millions of people, is now being rejected at international borders, something that no American farmer ever thought would happen before thousands of tons of corn were returned. Contracts are being cancelled. Prices are plummeting. Farmers from Iowa to Indiana are frantically searching for outlets. Meanwhile, Canada, a country that few pay attention to, is quietly dominating the game. Their corn is cleaner, more expensive, and they are signing billion-dollar deals with Europe, Japan, and South Korea. The American agricultural dream is shaking, while Canada steps into the position once held by the US without fanfare. Why is American corn being rejected? What makes the world turn its back on an agricultural icon? And more importantly, if we lose corn, what will collapse next? All data, opinions, and analyses in this video are for reference purposes only, compiled from various media sources and publicly available research. Up to the time of production, the audience should verify the information themselves before drawing conclusions or making financial decisions. But first, let's go through the 6 states that are most heavily affected, where each kernel of corn is no longer a symbol of life, but has become a burden no one wants to bear. Starting with Iowa, the largest corn-producing state in the country, now in a headache because no one wants to buy. Welcome to Iowa, where every square meter of land was once pure gold. If you measure gold in bushels of corn, with over 13 million acres of cornfields, Iowa was once the starch factory of the nation. But what about now? The price of corn has dropped below $3.50 per bushel. That is cheaper than a cup of coffee at a gas station. And in many places, farmers don't even bother to harvest anymore. Harvesting only leads to losses. A farmer shared, "I've been growing corn for 30 years, but this is the first time I let it rot in the field. Harvesting just to incur more losses. The silos are full. No one is buying anymore, no more storage space. The golden fields are now just a burden." Meanwhile, the grain processing factories, which used to be bustling day and night, now only operate 2 to 3 days a week. Workers have switched to driving for Uber or delivering food to those who no longer eat corn. Even schools are starting to cut back. No more budget for air conditioning. In the midsummer heat, Iowa children can only sit with hand fans and hope their parents still have jobs next week. Many children drop out of school because their parents can no longer afford gas, or they have to temporarily leave town to find other jobs. In a place once considered the world's grain production hub, an entire community is now gradually sinking into silence. No sound of harvesters, no sound of trucks, not even hope. Someone once said, "Want to know the health of a nation? Look at their fields." If that's the case, then Iowa is in a fever and perhaps even looking for a way to emergency rescue. And if Iowa, the pillar state, the strongest one, can still break, then what do you think awaits the weaker places? Next we go to Illinois, where the fields are no longer picturesque but start to smell of decay. If Iowa is the heart of agriculture, then Illinois is the lungs, and right now it is breathing oxygen through debt bills. Illinois was once called the land of corn and soybeans, but now, instead of discussing planting, farmers are talking about selling off debts, selling tractors, or even selling their land to Chinese companies. Just a few months ago, this place was still bustling day and night. Trains transporting corn from north to south, from farms to seaports. Illinois, the heart of American corn transportation. However, as the world begins to reject American corn, the train cars that used to roll every hour now sit idle for weeks. A farmer joked, but it was true. "I don't know if I'm farming or casting for the next season of Survivor Midwest Edition." Fertilizer prices have doubled. Agricultural loan interest rates hit 9%. While soybean prices are drifting back to the previous decade, Many farming families have to mortgage their assets just to keep incurring losses. Hundreds of drivers have lost their jobs. Some are selling their trucks on Craigslist. Some others take advantage of driving Uber during the day and delivering pizza at night. No one thought the agricultural transportation industry would collapse so quickly. In Joliet, corn packing plants have reduced orders by up to 60%. Shifts are being cut. Breaks are longer than work hours. No one has been laid off, but everyone knows it's just a matter of time. In the city, Chicago now resembles a glitchy Sim City game. A budget deficit, police resignations, and residents leaving the city more than corn is harvested. And if you think education is the salvation, then I'm sorry to say, many schools in rural Illinois have now switched to online teaching because they can't afford to fuel the buses. A teacher recounted, "I had to teach geography over Zoom from the kitchen while my child did homework next to me and asked, 'Mum, what's for dinner today?' I don't know. A state once the pride of the Midwest now resembles a rusty agricultural machine, out of oil and out of drivers. And while Illinois farmers are racking their brains to survive, Canadian farmers just across the border are counting export contracts worth millions of dollars. It's the same land. Both are beans, but one side is a country that knows how to invest, while the other can only sigh. Do you think Illinois still has a chance? Or will it follow Iowa into the club of defeat? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue the journey of uncovering the truth behind the quiet fields. If you ever thought of Nebraska as an endless cornfield under the sunset, erase that image immediately. Because now what stretches out is not corn, but worry. Where corn was once exported to Asia, now people have to be exported to other states to find work. People used to say in Nebraska, you just need to sow and heaven will provide. But now the sun still shines and the government can only shrug. Transport costs skyrocketed, export contracts were cancelled, and the weather was harsher than summer electricity prices. A farmer in Lincoln lamented, "Last year I planted to sell, This year I planted just to let it be. Next year, I'll probably plant just to post on TikTok to commiserate with farmers nationwide." The cooperatives now resemble community psychology centres, where the old farmers sit sighing beside cold cups of coffee, no longer talking about the harvest, but only saying, "Next year I'll quit this job and sell the land to someone who knows more about business." In rural Nebraska, gas stations have closed. Banks are only open twice a week, and department stores have switched to selling second-hand goods from Walmart. And while Nebraska farmers have to cut back on every gallon of irrigation water across the border, Canada is launching advertisements for premium made in Saskatchewan or corn on Japanese television. Why is that? Perhaps because Canada invests in the supply chain, in quality, and in its people. What about Nebraska? Only the sound of the wind blowing through the abandoned fields remains. Have you ever visited Nebraska or lived there? Does what you see now still resemble your memories? Please share in the comments section, and remember to follow the channel because the American agricultural facts that are about to be revealed will surprise you even more. In Minnesota, there are no loud sounds of harvesters, no long lines of trucks waiting to load. Perhaps there are only signs posted in front of the cooperative temporarily halting purchases. Not because of the price, but because there's no more space to store. Farmers are still harvesting. The harvest season still comes as usual, but for the first time, they didn't know where to take the corn. At a high school, teachers there say the number of students missing school is not due to illness, but because the parents no longer have money to buy gasoline or pay for lunch at school. A student shared, "I don't want to drop out, but my mum said we have to save on gas." The house is a 35-minute drive from school when children have to leave school because the harvest cannot be sold. It is no longer an agricultural crisis. That is a community crisis. In Moe, sales of seeders and fertilizers have decreased by more than 60% compared to last year. Farmers are no longer investing. Why? because planting more won't sell either. Perhaps Minnesota did not collapse with a loud bang. No storms, no protests. It is freezing one person at a time, one loan at a time, one lunch at a time. And if this cold comes from within the economy rather than the weather, how much longer will these small towns be warm enough to survive? If you are a young person in Minnesota, would you stay and continue farming or leave to start anew elsewhere? Please share your thoughts. Every year at this time, the fields in Indiana would be bustling with the sound of machinery, the smell of engine oil, and trucks loaded with corn lined up on the highway. But this year, there's nothing. The corn is still ripe, but no one harvests it. Harvesting means losses. The price of corn is lower than the cost of fuel, labor, and storage. Many people choose not to harvest because it's less of a loss than harvesting and then selling at a low price. A farmer in Rush County said, "I won't give up. I just can't keep spending money to work without anyone paying." In Fort Wayne and Terre, where hundreds of harvesters were once produced each month, there are now only a few scattered orders. Workers are given alternating days off. In other words, unofficial unemployment. The restaurants that used to be bustling with customers are now only open half the week. No one stops by for lunch anymore because there are no more lunch shifts. When the farmers are not harvesting, they don't need the machines. When no one needs the machines, the workers have no jobs. And when those who have jobs are no longer certain about next week, Indiana is facing a major challenge. Indiana used to be a place balanced between industry and agriculture. But now that balance has turned into a trap. No one buys corn, so no one harvests. No one harvests, so no one produces, everything stands still, and no one knows where to start again. And if even when the crops are ripe, they are still left to wither. What else can save this agricultural sector from cracking apart? Do you know anyone who used to work in a farm tool manufacturing factory? How have they been living in recent months? Missouri has never been the place with the most corn cultivation, but it is where the corn is packaged, labeled, loaded onto trucks, and shipped out of the United States. A final link, but no less important. From St. Joseph to Springfield, corn packing plants have reduced orders by up to 40% in just a few months. A factory outside Jefferson City even halted its entire packaging line. Not because of a technical fault, but because there's nothing left to print. Corn cannot be sold. No one needs packaging at the bus stops. Diesel revenue has decreased by more than 25%, a silent number. But it says it all. No corn is moving, no long-haul trucks. There's no longer any cash flow through these towns. The roadside Eries, once thriving on truck drivers, now only open a few days a week. Night shift workers now have to also cover the afternoon shift to maintain enough working hours. Everything is shrinking, not because of a sudden collapse, but because people have gotten used to the not being the same as before. No one talks about the cuts, but everyone understands that their turn will come soon. Missouri used to be the brilliant conclusion to the journey of every American corn kernel. Now, this place resembles a book, with the last line left unprinted. There are no sounds of trucks and no flow of money. And if the carriers stop as well, then who will keep the system moving? While the cornfields in the US are languishing, waiting for harvesters while the combines are covered with tarps, containers are being sent back, and the international market is turning its back. Canada to the north of the border is quietly securing billion-dollar contracts. Not because Canada grows more corn, not because they are cheaper, but because they are more trustworthy. Canada's clean, green, smart strategy. Canada has been preparing for this leap for many years. They are not loud, but extremely strategic. They invest in clean corn, no GMOs, no glyphosate pesticides, strictly adhering to EU and Asian standards. Along with that is batch quality control, ensuring no inferior products are mixed in. Transparent certification, easy traceability, something that international customers are particularly interested in, while American agricultural products are warned about chemical residues or unstable standards. Canadian corn is labelled as premium high-end goods. Why is international cooperation not politicizing trade? Unlike the United States, where trade relations are often tied to geopolitics, tariffs, and tit-for-tat measures, Canada takes the opposite approach. Canada establishes stable bilateral trade agreements lasting from 3 to 5 years with countries such as Japan, South Korea, Germany, and the Netherlands, focusing on long-term trust and credibility rather than short-term price competition. Always maintain a neutral trade position. Avoiding involvement in tariff wars, that is what makes importing countries feel safer when doing business with Canada. Even if the prices are a few percent higher, the supported agricultural system is not abandoned. In Ontario, an agricultural cooperative has just signed a contract to export $1.2 billion USD over 5 years to South Korea. This is not an isolated case, but the result of a well-supported ecosystem. Canadian farmers are insured for both yield and price, so they dare to invest in technology. The government supports inspection, transportation, and trade negotiations instead of leaving farmers alone in the global market. Transitioning to sustainable farming, meeting European climate standards, where the US still struggles compared to the US, where many farmers are unsure whether to plant again next season. The difference is clear. When the world actively seeks out without advertising in many markets, international traders proactively contact Canada to purchase corn. A South Korean Ministry of Agriculture official was quoted as saying, "Canadian corn has maintained stable quality for 5 years with no shipments returned, the same type of crop on the same continent. But on one side, they are signing billion-dollar contracts, while on the other side, they are burying corn in the ground because no one wants to buy it. It's not because American farmers are incompetent, but because they have been left behind in a system that no longer protects them." Canada doesn't need to do much, just do it right. And we, the United States, once the center of world agriculture, now must ask ourselves, how did we let everything slip away so easily? When a kernel of corn is no longer sold, it's not just a matter of price or inventory. That is the first sign that an entire ecosystem is fracturing, and ordinary Americans are the ones who bear the brunt of it. In many small towns in the Midwest, stories like this are no longer rare. A father lost his job after the ethanol plant cut back 60% of its shifts. The mother, who used to be a homemaker, now works part-time at a grocery store trying to make ends meet. The eldest child had to temporarily pause their university studies because they couldn't gather enough money for this semester's tuition. The youngest sibling misses a few days of school each week because there is no money left for gas to take them to school. A farmer in Nebraska said bluntly, "I used to tell my son, if you farm, you can support a whole family. Now, I only dare to tell him to study another field or leave this place as soon as possible." The livestock industry is also affected. Corn is not just an export commodity, it is food, the backbone of the livestock industry. But when corn prices are not sufficient to operate the grinding and pressing system, animal feed processing plants are forced to cut production or shut down. The consequence is a sudden spike in feed prices, supply shortage. Farmers are unable to continue raising livestock as before. Many farming families are forced to sell off their cattle or pigs, accepting losses to free up operating costs. A farmer in North Platte, Nebraska, bitterly said, "We don't sell cattle because it's profitable. We sell because we have no other choice." In many interviews, a phrase keeps appearing. We used to be proud of feeding the world. Now, no one needs us anymore. It is not just anger, but the psychological shock of millions of Americans who live with their self-esteem tied to the land and the seasons. The feeling of personal devaluation, loss of career direction, and loss of faith in the future is spreading. No protests, no banners, only the heavy silence remains in each small house in the rural areas of America. These impacts are no longer just a feeling, but have manifested into cold, hard numbers. The number of foreclosures in agricultural counties has increased by more than 30% in just 6 months. The number of people applying for food assistance has surged in states like Iowa, Indiana, and Minnesota. On Craigslist, the number of listings for used tractors and farming equipment has doubled. A silent SOS signal. A teacher in rural Missouri shared, "I see students coming to class with old shoes and thin winter clothes. Those children know nothing about trade policy, but they are living with its consequences every day. And the scariest thing is that no one is speaking up. This is no longer a failed harvest. This is a regional recession, deep and widespread, happening quietly. There are no sudden crashes. It's just that everything is gradually becoming empty, worn out from trust to the ability to exist. And meanwhile, elsewhere, Canada is signing another corn contract if the corn kernels can no longer feed American families." The question is not when will the market recover, but rather how many more people will leave this land before that happens. There was a time when just mentioning corn made the whole world think of America. There was a time from Iowa to Indiana, from Illinois to Kansas, when convoys of trucks loaded with corn ran day and night, reaching even the distant ports in the Pacific or Europe. America was the world's granary, the supplier, the center of the global food chain. But that time may have passed. While we still maintain the old farming methods, still using old fertilizers, still signing short-term contracts, dependent on market prices, while the world has quietly changed. Canada invests in a quality certification system. Brazil is greening its fields with new farming techniques. Europe is turning to intra-block support, becoming more self-sufficient. Japan and South Korea are shifting to buying from more reliable hunter-gatherer countries. And what about America? We still sow the seeds with old hopes, but we are living in a new world. America is a giant, but not always alert. In the agricultural sector, we have relied on reputation for too long, forgetting that reputation, like a crop, must be sown anew each year when China stopped buying. When countries demand higher standards, when global consumers care about traceability, carbon footprint and cleanliness, we can't keep up. And so we seem to be left behind, not by a crash, but by hundreds of contracts no longer being called upon, by thousands of containers no longer being loaded onto ships, with millions of bushels of corn lying in the fields with no one to buy them. The US once led every game from agricultural techniques, crop varieties, productivity, trade to policy supporting farmers. The world learns from us, buy from us, believe in us. But now the world is looking for a replacement, and they have found it. Canada for its stability and transparency, Brazil for its competitiveness and rapid expansion, Australia for its cleanliness and climate friendliness. In America now, just a choice that is no longer a priority. The real question must be, what do we have left to sell to the world if even corn, the symbolic crop, the foundational agricultural product, is no longer wanted, if corn is also rejected? If farmers no longer want to harvest, if the world no longer needs American agriculture, then who are we in this global picture? The world doesn't wait for anyone, and America can no longer continue to doze off. It's time to wake up before the name agricultural powerhouse becomes just a line in history books. We have just passed through 6 states, 6 stories that seem disconnected but share a common heartbeat. Loss, not just losing crops, losing contracts, losing value, but rather losing status, losing trust, losing a part of America's identity. The question now is no longer will corn prices recover, but rather how can ordinary Americans, those living on this land, continue to survive and hold on to what was once their pride? How many more seasons like this will there be before American agriculture truly loses its voice on the world map? If you live in rural areas or have relatives in the agriculture industry, please share your story below. What is happening is not news. That is the reality of life for millions of people, and it could be yours. Who do you think is responsible for this silent collapse? The policies, the market, or the prolonged indifference? We read all the comments and want to hear your voice. If you think stories like this need to be heard, please click subscribe. Not because of the algorithm, but because there are things that need to be told, and it needs to continue. We don't make videos for sensationalism. We recount what is really happening in places where the press has stopped going. The content in this video is based on public reports, citizens sharing and economic data from various reputable sources. We do not represent any government organization or interest group. The purpose is to inform, analyze, and provoke discussion, not to affirm, criticize, or incite any party. And if corn is the first grain to fall off the chain, then the next question is, which grain will fall next? Soybeans, milk, cows, or the faith of an entire generation in the future of this country? We will return in the next video to delve deeper into this picture with you. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out when the story continues.